and welcome back to Zapped to the Past and our coverage of the games that were reviewed in Issue 4 of Zap 64. I am your host, Adrian Mills, and I am joined by my good friend and C64 aficionado, Graham Raddings. Last week we looked at our first batch of games from this issue, and we were amazed that Way of the Exploding Fist was not a gold medal, led to consider whether all these collectathon games were a product of rampant 80s consumerism by the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and felt the slow creeping hand of death with Jack Charlton's Match Fishing. If you haven't listened to last week's episode, then I suggest you go and do so. One last thing, pleased to know, is that there are a couple of swear words that do crop up every now and again. We're not the sweariest of podcasts, I have to say, but there is the odd little one that does slip through in the heat of the moment. It's nothing major, but if it is an issue, then obviously please be warned that the odd one will slip through. Let's get on with things. Graham, tell us what we have to look forward to in this episode.
What don't we look at in this episode? We deep dive into the fourth protocol. We try and fly a Harrier jump jet. We really try and like Brian Bloodaxe. And we really try and like Set Willy 2. There's the feature. We look at Confuzion. Are we defusing bombs or are we igniting bombs in that game? Who knows? There's Elidon, international tennis, and we even take a deep look at Rambo. Not the game. That's in the film and TV section. There's something for everyone. Just get stuck in and have a listen.
Awesome. So, let's get on with the games. Okay, so without further ado, let us get into this. And we're going to be looking at this issue's gold medal game, which is the adaptation of Frederick Forsyth's The Fourth Protocol. There's a lot of F's there. Frederick Forsyth's Fourth Protocol. Tricky to say. Okay, so what is The Fourth Protocol? So this was a book written by Frederick Forsyth in the 80s, taking further writing from the headlines at the time. This is a story based around Russia wanting to break the Fourth Protocol. What the Fourth Protocol is an agreement between nuclear states that they won't smuggle in and detonate a nuclear bomb on a foreign territory, obviously for nefarious purposes. The plot of this book is that Russia are going to do that, so they're piecemeal smuggling in parts of a nuclear bomb to construct and then detonate outside an American Air Force base to obviously destabilize relationships between the UK and the US and NATO in general. And the book has a low-level MI5 agent who slowly starts to piece together this plot from various strands and manages to thwart it. Spoilers, sorry, the book's 30 odd years old. The game is actually quite a clever game. It's split into 3 acts, and similar to a game we reviewed back in issue 1, I think it was, and that was Shadowfire. This is an icon-driven game. So you play the low-level MI5, someone who works at a desk basically, who sends people out into the world to monitor, observe, and follow people based on info and intel that you get from various different sources, be that telephone calls, memos, emails, or whatever they are in this time. And the whole point is that this is all set in real time over a period of days, and you kind of have to piece together and try and work out what are the good leads and what are the real leads, what are the things that who are the people you need to follow, how many watches do you need to put on them, what action do you need to take if something does arise from that. And so you kind of trying to work out, is the you kind of get messages like, oh, some woman who works in the office has been seeing a foreign diplomat. Is that worth following around? Do we need to follow her out, or do we need to investigate that? Some guy has disappeared. Where's he gone? We need to follow that. Another guy is acting suspiciously at work or meeting with someone he maybe shouldn't do. Is that worth looking into, or is he just cheating on his wife? Who knows? The game is quite clever in the fact that you don't know what the right way is, what the right leads are, what the wrong leads are, or anything like that, and you have to try and piece this together as days go past, knowing full well the plot of the book, the plot of the game sort of thing. As the player, you're kind of aware that there's serious consequences here if you don't get this right. A nuclear bomb is going to go off, but it's really hard. And this is just the first section. So the first section is a series of icons. You send people out, you try and follow this stuff around. And I never managed it. Did you manage it?
No, absolutely not. No, I did not.
It's really hard, isn't it?
Yes, completely difficult. This wasn't just a tape in a box when you bought this game. There was a whole series of stuff that it came with, like an MI5 handbook and some code wheels, and it came with a load of stuff. So in the absence of having that stuff, which I think would have really, really facilitated how you played the game as well, I felt a little bit lost, I have to say. But that doesn't mean to say that it isn't a great game, because it is, and I suppose it's the ultimate puzzle solver, really. And that story is told, and you really have to, it's a real thinker, this one. You've got to really think about things. There's 3 parts to it, isn't there? I don't think I made it to the second parts, and because you've got to put code in there, haven't you, to get to the next bit?
You can just play the second. I did play the second part. It was the third one you got to put the code in for. I didn't give that a look.
Yeah, I looked at the second part, looked at the first part, made my way around the icons and got some of the clues. And the idea is you've got to try and sort out the leads from the sort of the misinformation, and there's a lot of that stuff in it. And I think what I needed to be was more in the Frederick Forsyth Fourth Protocol headspace, which I think just the extra stuff that came with this would have been, it's part of the experience. So, you got quite a lot of game for your money, and also you got all of the other stuff. And I think that would have helped sell it. In the absence of that, it just felt like I was just kind of digging around, scrambling around an office, trying to find stuff. That said, once you hit a couple of clues and you actually start to piece things and things start to happen, it's just, you can start to see how gradually you would fall into this game. And then, as you accurately say, the real worldiness of it, the implications of the things that are happening actually do start to have an impact. And you think, actually, I've got to get this sorted because this is going to happen if I don't. And I quite like that. There's a nice feel. And also, it was nice to look at and play. I found it quite easy to get into in terms of navigating around icons and windows. That's, we take it for granted now, but this was kind of completely new at the time.
And the icons are nicely, unlike Shadowfire, which I thought the icons were a bit overly graphic-y. They look nice and some nice bitmap visuals, but it was overly hard to understand some of them what they were. These were really clear. Pick up telephone, answer the telephone call, hang up, put on hold. Really simple memo stuff. Really simple. A trash can. Oh, let's get rid of stuff. It was easy to read.
It wasn't dissimilar to the Amiga Workbench, strangely enough.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you read the thing, I think in Zapped they said that they based it on the Mac OS.
Yeah,
and I think you can see that sort of thing. I think it's early computers. It does look like them.
Yeah.
I think it works really, really well. I did put sort of thing. I mean, it's a text adventure without the text.
Yeah.
But I think because it's without the text and you've got these icons and you're not restricted as to what you do at any one point in time, and you kind of feel really frustrated at times when you've got to advance the day. It's like, oh, I want something else to happen, but it's like that restraint and that minimalism is actually really works in its favor, because when something does happen, when the little icon pops up on the 3 monitors at the bottom, you're like, oh, new information, what's that all about?
Yeah.
And I actually found myself, I'm playing it on one screen and on the other, I had Notepad open and I was making notes. So a bit like, having a pen and paper back in the day sort of thing. I was making notes. Who's this? Jensen, Watson, Richardson. Who's this Warburton guy? He's got a telephone number. I need to ring it. It is really, really good. And I got booted out my job at about middle of July because I didn't do enough. Made wrong choices. But repeat playings, you could really see yourself, trying to work your way through this to get to that point where you had some inkling of what was going on. Because when you move into the second section, it becomes a bit more open. So you're actually trying to track down where the bomb is. So you move outside. You've got movement icons, so you can actually go out into the street, call taxi. You pick up a key from your first of all sort of thing, which you then open a drawer with. And so there's actual interaction. And what this reminded me of sort of thing, this is games like Labyrinth and then a little bit later on, things like Monkey Island. This is the start, an early precursor to some of those, where you're utilizing icons and choices and options and, things in your inventory to utilize. I mean, Monkey Island's graphically more advanced, but it's an adventure game without the text.
Well, it's the natural progression from text-based adventures to have an adventure with some kind of graphics. And instead of trying to do really bad graphic representations of the situations you were in or the environments you were in, a la The Hobbit, you get this, which it feels like you're in an office, you're on office computers, it looks kind of modern and businessy and it has that vibe. So yeah, an entirely playable, albeit, I'm now well out of 30 years out of date for the Fourth Protocol-y stuff, I suppose. Again, the lesson to be learned here is this is a spy kind of game, really, I suppose, in many ways. Take note, James Bond, people who make James Bond games, because I know that this isn't super as exciting as an action movie, but this is a much better game about spies and intrigue and MI5 and stuff than anything that came out of that James Bond game. And I got a lot more from this, albeit that it was graphically not animated in that way. I got a lot more from this than I did from that experience. And I felt I would probably, had I bought this back then, got a lot more value from the things that I bought, because it came with a lot of stuff. So what's not to like?
Yeah, I think it used the system's strengths, knowing that they're going for a realism. They went for a different kind of realism, whereas View to a Kill is just, like I said, that 3D stuff in Paris just looks stupid because it's just brown brick. And so this doesn't attempt to replicate reality in any way. When you get that bit where they say, oh, can you put some security in this building, you don't see the building, you just see the sort of the layout. That's all you need. The blueprints of the building. It's like, right, where do you want to put some locks? And so you can just move around it, or the pit bats can do it. You don't need anything more. It's very clever. It's very, I really like its restrained and minimalism. I really did. I think it worked well in tying in with the actual sort of Cold War 80s. It had the sort of a coldness to it, a distance to it, a sort of frostiness that sort of was part of that era. And again, it ties in with that fear of the nuclear bombs and stuff that was prevalent, as we've talked about quite a lot, strangely enough. My only caveat, and I was looking at this sort of thing, do I think it was gold medal material? And I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think it's really good. I'm not sure whether I don't know. I think it's really, really intriguing and good and different.
Well, I would argue that this has niche appeal. Their review in the magazine, which is, again, very evangelical for this, but their review basically says this game has something for everybody. If you like arcade games, you'll find something in this. And I'm like, actually, let's put this and the other great game that's in this magazine side by side. I know they're very different, so you're comparing apples for pears, but they use the same grading scheme for each of those games. So pound for pound, Fourth Protocol's doing better Fourth Protocol-y things. Way the Exponentis is doing much better fighting things. One is more of an arcade game. The other one is more of an adventure game. What makes a gold medal a gold medal? What made this a gold medal for, being better than that if you're going to compare those things? But it has super high scores as well. Crazy high scores. 98 for the music, for example, for this.
I know there's only that bit on the title screen. I didn't think it was that great.
And the words of one of the reviewers in Zapped, that is the greatest piece of C64 music yet heard.
I like its ambition, and I like its restraint, and I like its minimalism, and I like I really like its sort of its conviction to what it wants to do.
It is a really good adventure game, and it's it's innovative in its own way, and you're getting a lot of games and a lot of stuff. There's a lot going on in there. So I think there's a bit of a nod to the fact that this game is huge in its scope and actually pulls it off.
So there we go. We like that. It is good. Go play it. It still stands up today because of its simplicity, and it does work. I think you're right. You'll still find yourself with a bit of pen and paper or a notepad open if you play it, which is good. But you won't find it open with our next game, which is Jump Jet. Go on, Graham, have at it.
It's a jump jet simulator-ish. And again, you know what? Time travel, 1980s. The Harrier jump jet was an incredible and technical marvel, and it still is. It's amazing. The VTOL aircraft, genuinely a game changer, especially in conflicts, and it proved itself in many conflicts to be a real, incredible piece of design technology. Amazing. To simulate that kind of technology on 8-bit doesn't work. It doesn't work at this point. Then later on, they do better simulations of things, gunship and stuff like that comes along later. But at this moment in time, and this actually is weird because it's like, it sort of lies about what it is, because it doesn't look like a simulator when you first start it. You've got the little aircraft and you've got the little thing. But I had trouble getting it to take off. I wasn't sure what I was doing. I didn't last long, and it had really weird music as well, kind of really odd.
And that terrible speech.
Yeah, and the really awful speech, and, what was it? Don't crash, Commander, or I couldn't really make it out, but I think that's probably what we're saying. Which was never going to happen as far as I was concerned. And you could even start it off with layers of difficulty, right? So you could start off in practice mode, but each time I just got a kind of the same thing. I just end up not blowing up, but just saying fail for some reason, and I just got fed up with it. So did you actually get to take off?
Yeah. I managed to go flying. What I did was, because I couldn't work out the controls, what I did was I basically went and watched a YouTube. There's a really, really funny YouTube, which we actually should link to in the maybe the show notes if we have some guy trying to play this. And it just does nothing but swear at it. It's really funny, but he manages to sort of convey the controls, so I could pick it up from that. So you have to, when you first start off, you put your flaps down, which is F. So for anyone's listening, here's your controls. You press F to put your flaps down, then you press 3, which will thrust you downwards. Then you press the minus key on your keyboard, which will increase your speed, because remember the Commodore 64s are backwards. So you press the minus key, that'll increase it, and then that'll start you flying upwards. If you then press 4, I think it is, that will then, once you've taken off, you'll start flying. Don't do that though, because what happens then, once you get to the actual flying screen, is you just fly around the ocean.
Oh.
You press M to bring up your missiles, and every now and again, a plane will appear in front of you, which you can shoot. There's 2 things on the radar that take forever to reach, and you can blank left and right and put your VTOL wherever you want, and that's it.
Oh.
I wrote needlessly complex and dull Harrier jump jet sim. The Harrier is one of the coolest planes ever. How do you make it dull? By making you fly really slowly over the ocean.
Yeah, that'll do it.
I get if you want to make a sim of it sort of thing, but you could have put this over land, put this somewhere, have some stuff happen. And I tried it on all the difficulty levels. The same thing happened all the time. Nothing.
Yeah.
You have to ask yourself, what's the point? I didn't understand what the point of this was. Because, like I said, planes did appear and I could shoot them from time to time. So is this a fight simulator? flight and combat simulator? Is it a flight sim? What is it? Couldn't get my head around it. I've no problem with complex controls to do that sort of thing, but once you got up, there weren't complex controls. You just banked left and right and shot stuff.
No fun.
No. Again, it's one of those games sort of thing which they think, this would be great at the time because people will get to fly a Harrier jump jet. Except you're not even close. No. So dull and boring and pointless.
Which seems to be the end few words that we say on every flight simulation we've come across so far. So, there you go.
If Zapped to the Past has a catchphrase, it's dull, boring, and pointless.
Put that on the box of your game.
We're not though. We might put that under Zapped to the Past. Come listen to us. We are dull, boring, and pointless.
There's the three names for the Rice Krispies characters before they actually became Snap, Crackle, and Pop.
Dull, boring, and pointless.
No one's going to buy this cereal. No one's buying that cereal.
When it was just called Rice. Yeah. Dull, boring, and pointless.
Needs a better name. Something crispier.
Oh, God, it pains me to say it, but it's better than the next game. Because our next game we're looking at is Brian Bloodaxe. Right, so Brian Bloodaxe. It's another Manic Miner. Flick screen. Manic Miner came out in what, 1983? Yep. So we're 2 years on. This tries to be funny. This tries to sort of grasp some kind of Monty Python-esque humour by having some sort of strange, we've taken over your Commodore title, main page screen with some text and isn't it funny and stuff. And it's like, no, none of it is. It's just crap and boring. And I know this might sound damning, but the humour, what I've written is the humour, the visuals, the noise, the slowdown, the flickering.
Yeah, flickering. Oh, that flickering.
Oh, God, flickering sprites. And you go onto a screen, and if there's more sprites than there was in the previous one, then you're running at such a slower rate. There's no consistency in the movement. It is essentially one of those Manic Miner, things moving around, platformers, single colour nonsense. I've actually put this down for contender for one of the worst we've looked at.
Yes, it is. And it's also full price.
And we played Circus.
This is full price. As they rightly point out in that Zap review, you could buy 5 Mastertronic games for this. It was awful. Absolutely. It was just awful. It's not doing Manic Miner any justice to produce this garbage. And I don't like games. Let's not start that. Can we stop milking at this point? Let's stop milking the Monty Python teat. You must, because at the end of the day, that was what I think the final one was in the very early 80s, maybe even in the late 70s. And I know there's a longevity to Monty Python, but this just doesn't capture any of the Monty Python humour at all for me. It's just silly, stupid stuff that makes no sense. It was just a crap Manic Miner. No way around that. And it just tries to be funny, but fails at every point.
Yeah.
Crappy, flickery graphics on a Commodore 64. You have to work hard to make the graphics do that. You do, because it's got a graphic chip, a specific graphics chip designed to put graphics on the screen with all of the registers and settings that you could need for a graphics chip on an 8-bit computer. Its own memory banks, which you can shift around. It's powerful. So you've got the VIC graphics chip inside a Commodore 64, very capable. No other computer had that. It was the only computer that had the VIC chip. And what do you do with that? You produce something that would look crap on a Spectrum, which didn't have a graphics chip of that type.
No, it didn't.
So this was just rubbish.
Yeah, it's that thing in it. It's what we said about BC Grog. It's like somebody created a character they thought would be hilarious, likable, liked. We've already looked at advert last week. We looked at Dynamite Dan. This is just another one of those. It's like, let's create something that's Brian Bloodaxe, Dynamite Dan, Manic Miner. This notion that if you stick 2 words with the same thing, it's gonna be the word Bloodaxe and Brian, that goes together. Then it goes Life of Brian, channeling into that. No, none of this works. None of this. Brian Bloodaxe is crap. Brian Bloodaxe bad. Bloody bad.
Just rubbish. Just rubbish. I'm sick of those Manic Miner games. I'm sick of them. There's Manic Miner. Yeah. And that was okay because it was of its time and it's Manic Miner. Stop making them. Stop remaking them. Stop doing anything other than just don't. Stop. Stop in the tracks. Stop.
Well, we've got another one coming up.
And I've said the same about that bloody piece of crap as well. Stop.
So we won't say anything about the next one. We'll just recut and paste this.
just change the name.
Change the name because we're going to say the same. There you go. Brian Bloodaxe, Jump Debt. No, we don't get. Fourth Protocol, great. That's the first part of the games. Oh, God. I hate ending on bad games. I'm going to start rearranging it. So let's move on and let's look at the interesting things that were going on in film and TV for August 1985. Welcome back. We are moving into films and TV in August 1985. So what was going on in the world of TV in our lovely 4 channels that we had? We've spoken about this before, so just a quick thingy. After the Bond series continued with Threads being repeated.
Oh, God.
Because obviously Threads being repeated is really what you want.
Yeah.
This month is really dull. I don't know what was going on. I think everyone was outside. I think it was a nice month. Because the interesting things, on the 5th of August, Central Television launched a new presentation package that sees its moon logo redesigned into a 3-dimensional shape.
Do you know, I remember that Central TV 3D shape.
God damn it. But there, on the 13th of August, this is weird, ITV airs the US intergalactic whodunit, Murder in Space.
Never heard of it.
No, I don't remember this at all, but the film is shown without the ending, and a competition held for viewers to identify the murderers. The film's concluding 30 minutes are shown a few weeks later, with a studio of contestants eliminated one by one until the winner correctly solves the mystery, and there was a prize of £10,000.
That's actually quite a cool idea, but was that...
I know.
Because ITV was regional, so I wonder if that wasn't our region. That's probably,
Maybe it was on Central.
It sounds to me like something that we would have probably got into.
I really would have loved that. Yeah, it sounds amazing.
Yeah, it does sound good.
On the 31st of August, Scottish Television launches a new computer-generated ident. So I put a month so dull that TV idents are the highlights.
The old ones were around for a while, and we all remember them, right? The Thames one with the mirror image of the Thames, and the Anglican one. Is it Anglican or Anglian? Anglian. Anglian with the little silver knight. Yeah, rotating, and then
Yorkshire TV with the Y.
Yeah, so, and they all changed, and nowadays people don't have those, do they? They don't have the little local branches, really. I suppose Canada still exists and stuff, but...
I'm really interested in that Murder in Space, though. I mean, that sounds a US intergalactic whodunit. I'm actually, generally, I've never heard of this.
No, and curious as to know who was in that. I quite like my 80s sci-fi. That's never come across my radar, which worries me, because I like some real crap. So that worries me that I've not come across that.
That's true, you do. You really do.
I do. I can't help it. I just do. And that's never come across my radar, which makes me wonder it was either really good or really, really bad. So
there was some interesting stuff in the early 80s. Like, it reminds me of that. Did you ever watch Special Bulletin? Which is like one of the very, very earliest sort of realistic found footage type things about it's a nuclear bomb on the docks. That's that sort of thing. Some interesting stuff was being made, but this sounds really... Can you imagine being in that audience, like trying to work it out?
It had Michael Ironside in it. Makes it instantly watchable.
Oh man, I'm tracking this down.
Not only does it make it instantly watchable, it also places it immediately in sci-fi 80s, because that guy was in everything in the 80s and early 90s. Everywhere. He popped up everywhere.
Was it a V spin-off?
Just reading this little...
Reading...
Yeah, no, it's not. He was in V, and he was the best part of the VTV series. Don't even get me started on that.
It's the best part of most things he's in.
This is basically it's a whodunit. So it's Cluedo in space. It's Cluedo. So you had to figure out who killed what with the who and how inside this spaceship, essentially. So and modern objects. So we didn't go into outer space and kill them with a candlestick in the library,
a lead pipe,
a lead pipe in the parlour.
What kind of spaceship you building here?
I suspect I'm just going to put this out there. I suspect that the background somewhere are going to feature some blinky lights, because let's face it, if you've got a spaceship in the 80s and you're going anywhere, you've got them blinky lights.
Absolutely.
You need blinky lights. I watched Logan's Run only last night, strangely enough, and Logan's Run had lots of blinky lights in it. So blinky. They even had blinky lights on their hands in Logan's Run. There's blinky lights everywhere in that film.
Why are we watching Logan's Run?
Because I like crap films from the early 80s.
Logan's Run's good. Sanctuary.
It's not, though.
All right.
But that's kind of what appeals to me.
Plankton.
It's not. It's kind of silly. I mean, we don't want it. It's not even part of our remit. But just as an aside, if you ever want to watch a sci-fi movie with the worst payoff, watch that one. They go through all the trauma and all that trauma and agony to only be confronted by Peter Ustinov, incoherently talking gibberish, surrounded by cats. That's the payoff for their escape to Sanctuary. They meet him. That'd have clubbed him to death and carried on searching.
Eating him for his plankton and sea greens from the sea.
That's it. That's box. Again, don't get me started. That's a whole other podcast episode. Maybe there's a game of Logan's Run. There was a TV series. Maybe there's a game. But anyway, so Michael Ironside's in that. Anyway, he plays Neil Braddock,
of course he does.
The captain of the Conestoga. That's the name of the ship. The Conestoga is the name of the ship.
Okay, that's a catchy title.
Well, get this. The crew's made up of people from the USA, the USSR, Canada, East Germany, France, and Italy. So you know how that's going to work out.
To the Russian.
And let me guess,
did it, I guess.
most likely the Russians are going to be the ones that are dead, and you're not going to blame the Russians for everything. So I suspect, although I can't confirm it without watching it, that Canada probably got something to do with it.
To be fair, though, after this, looking at this August sort of thing, we've got a Giorgio Moroder album to listen to and some weird Murder in Space thing to watch. So
Yeah. With Michael Ironside in it.
It's a better way of spending your time than playing Brian Bloodaxe. Anyway, let's move on. So that's TV, new idents, and a whodunit in space. Let's move on. Films. There were 2 films released for cinemas in August 1985. The first was Brewster's Millions.
That's the Richard Pryor movie, right?
Yeah, where he's a baseball player, isn't he? He gets challenged by a dead relative to spend $30 million in a month and have nothing to show for it by the end, so he can inherit, something like $300 million?
Yeah, something crazy amount, yeah.
This film is so 80s about consumerism and stuff that it's almost off the chart.
Absolutely. Yeah, like, it is. Absolutely. Rampant.
But you got to spend more to get more. That's basically this sort of thing. So obviously someone finds out the shenanigans. He hires people. He does lots of things. He's Richard Pryor being Richard Pryor. John Candy being John Candy, and they spend money, a lot of it. He runs there's actually a really funny section in there, which I do remember, which is the political campaign. Vote for none of the above, which I think is actually quite clever and quite good. And, it's a mid-80s high-concept comedy, and it's all right. I imagine if you went back now, there's a few laughs to be had.
A slapstick comedy about money laundering. What's not to like about that? Funnily enough, Richard Pryor was quite popular at that time because he'd done The Toy and he did Brewster's Millions, and he'd done, of course, Stir Crazy and... Yeah,
him and Gene Wilder, Silver Streak.
So, there was a good track record for that. So it is quite a fun film, and again, it's got good... John Candy's always watchable in the movies he's in. Doesn't end on his face, though, which most John Candy's movies seem to end on a close-up of his face. That one doesn't, so it's...
More interestingly, though, on the 30th of August, Rambo, First Blood Part 2 was released.
Yay.
So for those who don't know this, let's face it, we'll probably talk about Rambo anyway later on, something when the game comes out. But Rambo, First Blood Part 2, the sequel to, the pretty serious and really good First Blood, directed by Ted Kotcheff. I can't remember who wrote the book.
Directed by Ted Kotcheff,
it
correct?
Was directed by him, I wanted something, but I can't remember who wrote the book originally.
No, I couldn't tell you that.
Well, First Blood is a Vietnam vet coming home, finding everything that he knew gone, and then essentially harassed and pushed beyond breaking point by small town sheriff and police department, and all hell breaking loose and kicking off. And that's Rambo, and it's all to do with psychosis of the veterans coming back from Vietnam and not being able to cope,
accepting them,
and all that sort of thing. And it's Rambo, but I think First Blood gets looped into the Rambo franchise when First Blood is a very different film, and really the Rambo franchise starts with this. Really,
yes, it does.
This is a very, very different film to First Blood. Very different. This is essentially Rambo versus Vietnam.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
This started the missing in action. This is responsible for missing action from Chuck Norris and stuff. I think all that sort of thing, and all those kind of going back to Vietnam to rescue trapped soldiers who were stuck in Vietnamese hellholes. I know you're a big fan of this film, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Unashamedly, a big First Blood Part 2 Rambo film, and I'll tell you why. At the time, it was criticised as being one of the most violent movies ever made.
It was.
That's a good selling point for me.
Yes.
It is the first, again, benchmark movie for the lone American gun-toting crazy hero, and there's many more movies that came off the back of this. In fact, loads of them. Mm-hmm. And it also made other people's careers, not just on the back of this with Sylvester Stallone, but with Commando and with all of the Delta Force and all of those kind of movies. There's tons of them. There's tons and tons of movies. American Ninja, there's loads of them. There's a list as long as your arm. But Rambo was the benchmark for those because it contained the benchmark moments that are required for that kind of film type. So, evil enemy that gets blown up in a horrific way, brutal, crazy murders, because they take little elements of First Blood and the first movie, and they explode those into completely new things. So there's a tiny moment in First Blood where he takes out his survival knife and checks his compass. The knife became the thing. So, he has this knife that has a crazy toolkit in it, right? Okay, put that in there, make sure he's got that. There's a moment where he fires a gun in, many guns in First Blood, but there's a moment later in the film where he gets a great big big caliber M16 machine gun.
Yeah.
Okay, Rambo, so you've got to have that moment because everyone remembers that bit, so put that bit in. Never mind, the first one was about a struggling Vietnam veteran returning home and finding everything changed. His best friends died and he doesn't fit in, and actually the society rejects him, and he can't cope with that. Take all that out, and then take that guy who was traumatized and placed in prison for what he did, and then say, right, we're going to give you a pardon if you can rescue these people. But he actually originally only goes in there with a camera to take recon pictures, and then he discovers that the people are actually there. He's not meant to actually go and do that. And then they double cross him and so and the plot. Now, why do I like it? Because it is uncompromisingly what it is.
Yeah, that's true.
It's an all-out action movie. You're very quickly into the action. And like Predator and like a ton of other movies that came after it, where there was film set in jungly stuff, bad guys are hiding in the trees and blow everything up you can. And if possible, either blame one culture or another culture, but, it doesn't matter who they are, really. They're just cannon fodder for the one-man army. And so all of that stuff that they sold about John Rambo in the first movie, for me, God didn't make Rambo, I did. He'd eat things that make a billy goat puke, and all of that stuff that they sold him on. This film just made all that reality. That is what he did. When they said Rambo was the guy that you sent in to do this stuff, this is the explanation of what he was sent in to do. So when you sat there thinking, what masters war by attrition and who lives off the land, and how does a guy like that operate? Well, Rambo and all the films that come after it, up to the horrific last one, are the explanation of what that means.
Okay,
I find that really compelling. Yeah, it's crazy violent and it's really stupid and it is mad. If you actually look at the film from start to end, it's mad because it sort of has multiple endings as well, and it's a bit confused in its story, but it's just one guy killing loads of people and blowing stuff up at a time when not many movies did that, but loads more did afterwards.
Loads did afterwards, yeah.
Yeah, and even then, and then even it struggled with its own sequels, where to go with that, and only really revisiting the soul of Rambo and that sort of agonising soul searching that he's had to do because of all the things that he's done. They only really revisit that in the later sequel, Rambo 3, which is a mishmash of a movie anyway, didn't really do that. But this, for me, out and out, great action movie classic, and still good to this day. I still watch it now. Great soundtrack as well. Really great soundtrack.
It does have a good soundtrack.
Music maketh the film in this one, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do. I mean, I watch it. Is it guilty pleasure? I don't know whether you call it guilty pleasure or whatever sort of thing. But I just I get everything you said then, sort of thing, and I'm not going to argue against any of that. I think you are absolutely spot on. My argument would just be: did we need to see him what he was? I think we saw enough of that in First Blood. He lives in the mines, he skins stuff, he sews himself back up, he does all that kind of thing, and he does his war by attrition. They think he's dead and he's not. He lives in the mines, all the rats and stuff. I don't know. That's why I said at the beginning, sort of thing, of this little bit, was that First Blood is almost a film from a different series. If this was just called Rambo, then I think calling it First Blood 2 almost a misstep. Almost, it's the same character, but it's almost a different character. I'm not going to knock it. It is what it is. It did open the floodgates to all those other films, and I think you're absolutely 100% spot on with that. The latter half of the 1980s is absolutely replete with these sort of thing, and you probably wouldn't even have things like Lethal Weapon. I don't know if that's around the same time. Is around the same time? Is that just slightly after? Maybe Die Hards and all things like that. It's I don't know whether this is the first one. I don't know. There's probably earlier ones in this sort of thing, but it's the single man army against loads.
And let's face it, I mean, look who he's taking on in this film. It's not just the Ruskies in this one, is it? He's taking on the Vietnamese as well, or a surviving faction of that. So it's just all out war with everyone, and it sets its groundwork. If you think of the movie poster, it's just that great image of Sylvester Stallone stood with a rocket launcher in front of everything on fire. And that tells you everything you need to know about that movie is in that image. And talk about high concept. I mean, this doesn't need that quirky, catchy songs. This is just that image. It's the film is captured in that. That is it.
And I think it's a thing of the time, isn't it? Because I think that there are movie stars now. There are people like The Rock. There are still people like Tom Cruise is obviously still working, things like that. There are certain, maybe Jason Statham or something. There are action movie stars, but these guys in the 80s were icons. They were iconic. They were a different kind of thing. You Schwarzenegger, and at the top, like you Schwarzenegger and you Stallone at the top of these things were just box office gold. And then it was a different, very, very different time. And I think you're right. I think it was like, we're just going to blow shit up and you're going to come and watch it and enjoy it. These kind of films, I can watch them, but I can't, I don't know. I don't know if I enjoy them these days, sort of thing. I watched Commando recently. I don't know about Commando. I think it's an endearing film, not an endearing franchise. Some interesting little factoids just to finish off, I suppose, this little bit from me anyway. Yeah, go on then.
So the first draft of First Blood Part 2 was written by James Cameron. This explains a lot about James Cameron's later movies and stuff, really.
Yeah.
And It features Steven Berkoff mysteriously plays a Russian. It still baffles me to this day why they didn't just get a Russian. But I think he isn't even in many films, Steven Berkoff. Why suddenly he was chosen for...
It's probably cheap. And he could put on a Russian accent.
And it's also, it cost $25 million to make, believe it or not, Rambo, which is incredible when you think about it. And it's taken well over $1 billion in its franchise time. So
there, Rambo, First Blood Part 2, 1980s, I think at some point we've got to hit Rocky 4, and then it becomes the summit or the nadir of that kind of thing. I'm not sure which.
Exactly. It didn't stop, did it? It just kept coming out with, if it isn't them blowing people up, it's them punching people out. They're just, they really didn't like the Russians at this point in time, the Americans, and they made a bloody point of it. Every movie had some Russian baddie getting crushed, steamed, stabbed, rolled, squashed, battered, you name it.
Anyway, there we go. So that's your film and TV for August 1985. They drew first blood. All right, welcome back. That was the films. Now we've got some more games for you. So our next one was a sizzler, and that game is I think we've covered this in our Crapverts sort of thing, because it's a bit of a strange advert, but the actual game is Confuzion. So Confuzion, I'll just read my notes actually. Simple block sliding puzzler that is really quite addictive due to it doing what it does simply and well. It's got a really good core idea. It's a block slider. So what you have, essentially, you have a spark, but these blocks create paths. They've got paths on them, so move left to right, up and down, they curve round. Off one of these blocks, on one side is like a bomb, and you have a spark that moves through these paths. What you've got to do is slide the blocks around to create a path where the spark is moving to get it to the bomb in a limited space of time. Otherwise, the bomb explodes. And that's it. Because the spark is constantly moving, you've got to be constantly trying to figure out where you want to move the block. And you can only move, you've got one space on this block sliding puzzle, so you can only move, the into the empty space, whatever blocks are around that one, the other squares around that. And you're trying to kind of figure out on the fly how you need to get this spark, and you'll think you've got it, and then it'll move off in a different direction because you haven't quite figured it out, sort of thing. And you'll be like, oh no. And you get past the first level, so the first level is not too hard, and then it starts introducing more things. So you've got multiple bombs, you've also got water that moves around the maze as well, similar to you, so you need to avoid that, you need to move that around. But remember, all you can ever do is move one block at a time, and this becomes really tricky as it moves on. This is a really, really good single screen puzzler that has a really, really clever premise, clear visuals, everything's really nicely represented. The bombs just say bomb, the spark is obvious, everything moves, there's no problem with it, it moves smoothly. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. What did you think?
Same, clever game. Slide the piece around to align the tubes so that the fuse, isn't it? So that the fuse spark can go travel a fuse and hit the bomb. It gets quite challenging. It's quite addictive. It's a good puzzle game, a really good puzzle game. No compromise puzzle game. Nice to see something like that. Just once you know the basic premise, you don't need to know more. It just, the difficulty is that, you've obviously, these challenges to being able to figure out the puzzles and stuff like that. I found it quite good. Very early Rob Hubbard soundtrack in there to boot as well, albeit that it's not his greatest piece, but it's in there. So as a package, I really enjoyed it. I thought it looked nice as well. Graphics are nice, dead simple movement and animation, but that said, it just felt slick. It felt, as we've said with a few of the games before now, it was nicely finished, nice polish on this game. And I think if I'd have splashed the cash for this particular game, I'm not a fan of, I say not a fan, I don't mind them, but I wouldn't go out of my way to go and buy a puzzle game. But I'd not played Confuzion before, actually, strangely enough. It never crossed my radar, so playing it, I felt actually this probably would have been something I'd have enjoyed. It was a good, challenging little game. It was one of those games you'd load up and just kill a bit of time. You'd have a go and try and beat a score or something like that. It was one of those kind of games where you'd come back to it because it was easy to play. You didn't have to relearn anything. It was simple. You pick it up in 2 seconds. Yeah,
well, ironically, that's exactly because I've written a game that would happily play well on modern phones and be quite the time sink.
Yeah, in fact, get your remake hat out and off you go.
Absolutely. This is really simple sort of thing because you're just dragging blocks around, swipe left and right, up and down, you move your block, things moving around. This would work perfectly on a phone because it's very, very quick. If this loaded up, like instantly it was there, you're into the first puzzle and it's moving and you've got some nice little visuals and stuff. This would be an absolute winner on a phone.
Yeah, I agree. But you can't call it Confusion, so you'd have to call it puzzled or challenged. Actually, not challenged, that sounds bad.
Well, to be fair, I mean, that's the only thing about it. Confusion's not really a great name for it.
But Sparky Bomb Chased was not... just wasn't popular.
Sparky Bomber. But to be fair, you had a game called Fat Worm Blows a Sparky at some point.
You did, actually, yeah.
You didn't need to call it, because Confusion, yes, you are confused, but why the Z in Confusion?
Yeah.
It's a strange...
hang on, it's a play on fuse, isn't it? Yeah.
It's a play on fuse, but it still doesn't work.
No, and... no, it
I don't think it particularly works as a title.
No, and that advert that we saw didn't convey any of that to me. If it had said...
No, because the spark's on a straight line in the advert, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, and interestingly, you actually have to blow the bomb up, not try and not blow it up, which is quite cool as well. So
So yeah, I think this would really work well now. Yeah, don't call it Confusion because I don't think Confusion has anything to do with it. But I think
Fused
Sparky Bomb
would be good.
Sparky Bomb Puzzle is the winner. I can see that really ranking quite high in the Apple charts.
Yeah, no, blow a fuse, short fuse.
Absolutely. All the kids will be chatting about that. What level you got to on Sparky Bomb Puzzle? It's a playground winner.
In a world of Boaty McBoatface, whatever he was called, Sparky Bomb Puzzle would work.
This was really good, and I think that when a good idea is delivered well and simply put and polished and finished and just here you go, here's a nice idea, and I think it's the fact that it's not just a puzzle block, but adding that little element. Because we get slidey puzzle games like splitting images when that comes later.
Split personalities, yeah.
Split personalities, yeah. But having the spark constantly moving means you've got to be constantly. You sometimes you're waiting to get it on the block you want it to move it to the place you want, and there's a really nice push and pull that you've got to wait, but the time is constantly going down. Yeah, this was really good.
And from a technical perspective, actually, it doesn't look it. But that's complex stuff going on programming-wise to have that little spark chasing around those patterns on those tiles because they are more or less completely random and you can move them any way you want. So clever stuff it is.
Yeah, and knowing that it bounces off, doesn't have one. Yeah, there is some really nice things in this. I think this is a real winner, and definitely deserves its sizzler.
Yes, absolutely. Now that is a sizzler for me. See that's the very definition of sizzler is that game, which is why Way of the Exploding Fish should have been a gold medal. Just to say it again, just to put it out there again.
Zapped get it wrong.
Sorry, did you forget for a minute? I just wanted to remind you. It should have gone. Anyway, okay, yeah. But it is a great game, Confusion. And I really, I did enjoy that. And I'd go back to it and play that again. Even, like you say, that's mobile game fodder, Apple Arcade fodder right there.
Yeah, I think so. There's probably loads like it already, but it's just a really good premise.
Yep.
It just works. Unlike the next one. So you didn't play this, did you?
No, I played a really bizarre...
a different version.
Text adventure, essentially. And I could just end a one-word review for that. Rubbish, so...
Yeah, well,
over to you for the actual...
Okay, so this is a game called Captive. Another Mastertronic, $1.99. Game. So there were multiple games again called Captive in our bank of ROMs, and I really should check them before I upload them.
I should just check Zapped, to be fair. I don't know why I didn't.
So Captive, what is it? It's a scrolling screen adventure with some interesting touches. The visuals are a bit rubbish. You play some kind of guy sort of thing. You wander around. The screen scrolls about. It's not full screen. You can pick up stuff, and when you stop over something, you press the fire button, and you get a little menu of stuff you can do. You can drop item, pick up item, use item, all these sort of things. So you pick stuff up, and you go wandering around. And there's stuff you can pick up like scrolls. So there's monsters wandering about, and it was okay. I did wonder sort of thing because this came from Mastertronic. I read in the review that they'd done a game called Spooks or something before this.
It's a follow-up apparently.
Because this reminded me very heavily of Master of Magic. Yeah. And I wonder whether this was a precursor by the same guys who went on to do Master of Magic. Because Master of Magic essentially has you wandering around a maze, smaller graphics of them, picking stuff up, finding stuff, fighting monsters. And a bit more refined version of this. I may be completely off base here. I don't know. But this did remind me of sort of step in the evolutionary scale till we get to Master of Magic, which is really good. It's okay. I think if you took your time with this could be all right. But again, it looks like a bit like Saberwolf, type visuals. It's, I don't know. It's not quite got what it needs to really work properly. And I think that was a bit of an issue with it. Sort of thing. For $1.99, don't think you'd complain if you bought this. I think if you bought this at $1.99 back in 1985, you'd go, yeah, right. And you'd probably actually dig into it. I think, there's a lot of objects to pick up. There's a lot of things to work out. I think you'd be quite happy with it. I think you should, pass a weekend if you spend a couple of quid of your pocket money on it. But going back to it now, I think this is, a step in an evolutionary step towards better things that kind of you just go play the newer things now. So it is what it is. Zapped seemed to think it was okay. It was kind of give it a middling review, and I think that was pretty much spot on. It's not great. I think what I liked more about it was the fact that it actually scrolled around rather than bloody flick screens. I'm so fed up of flick screens by this point. It's not terrible. It will pass your time. I can't 100% recommend it. There's loads of other better games to play, but it wasn't. It didn't offend me as like some other games have done that we've played today.
It was created by somebody called Nigel P. Johnston, by the way.
I like the fact that we P.
Nigel Johnston did that, just so you know that strangely enough, Master of Magic was programmed by no one other than Richard Darling himself.
Was it really?
It was indeed.
Wow. Well, there you go. I got it wrong. But I still think Richard Darling might have looked at this.
Oh, I don't doubt it. They're all mates. Essentially, it was a cluster of programmers that could do stuff, but the graphics are rubbish on this. The Captive, aren't they? I tell you what, they're better than the graphics in Captive that I played by miles, because there really wasn't any. But this kind of hokey sort of screen character graphics that they have. I just don't like that on a Commodore that's capable of so much more. But the command menu, as you say, interesting. So.
Yeah, that's what I mean by having this sort of. It's not just about finding stuff; it's about using stuff, and that sort of extra step to make this a little bit more than something like you just pick up objects and take them somewhere and like that. You've got to try and figure out what to do, which is what reminded me of Master of Magic, where you had the inventory system. You could use stuff and use different weapons on various monsters and things like that. So I never knew Richard Darling did that. I'm quite intrigued. I was quite impressed. I love Master of Magic.
The Darlings did a lot of those early Mastertronic and Mad games that came out, because, of course, Mad was the extra ones.
Mad ones, yeah. I think you could spend £2 a lot worse.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have spent all your money on Brian Bloodaxe.
Yes. How angry would you have been at that?
I'd have been very angry. Really, really, really angry. Rambo angry.
Exactly. There's going to be a wall of fire behind me, let me tell you. And I'm holding a rocket launcher.
I mean, a Bloodaxe, which I would be as well if I spent my money on the next game as well. We're talking about Set Willy 2.
Now, okay, my simple question is, how is this different from Set Willy 1?
Well, but my first question, why did we need another one of these?
Yeah, I didn't see the difference.
And my next comment was, I smell Willy cash in.
Yeah, ew. That's not a sentence you ever want to say, is it? I've just put, Set Willy was of its time and uninteresting. This is out of its time and equally as uninteresting. Crap music. And I put just if you're going to play Set Willy, go and play Set Willy.
Yeah, this got tacky, didn't it?
I don't know what this is, and I can see why. I don't even know what. I don't get it. Where did it come from? Why does it exist? How is it the sequel to something? Because it looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
What's different about it?
It's done by different people. I mean, to be fair, I mean, I don't know if they got hold of the source code or whatever sort of thing for everything. It looks and plays like a Manic Miner game and Set Willy. So the fact it's done by different people, fair play if they've replicated it through code. Yeah, that's good. But to me, this reeks of money grabbing. This reeks of the fact of because we know, Matthew Smith was in a bad way, I think, by this point, from everything we understand, sort of thing. And we know that there was a sequel to Set Willy that was in production, I believe, that he was making, but he had mental health issues and had to stop, and obviously just dropped out of the games industry, sort of thing. So for them to come and get some other people to make a Set Willy 2, I think this is reeks of just shilling for a name. And I think that Brian Bloodaxe, all the other ones we've looked at that look like this sort of thing, they're just trading on the name of the Manic Miner, the Set Willy, the Willy name. That's not right. That's not good. Considering what we know about Matthew Smith now, I don't think it's a really good thing to set your game up to basically, he can't do it because he's having some real issues, sort of thing. So we'll just farm it out to these two guys, and can you just make us another Set Willy? We said it before. I think we were quite scathing about some other game that did something similar-ish. I can't remember what it was now. This was
basically a franchise extension. It wasn't released initially on the Sinclair Spectrum, which was really the home of Set Willy and Manic Miner. Obviously, it's Manic Miner, then it's Set Willy.
Yeah.
Set Willy 2, The Final Frontier, was an expanded version released on everything but the ZX Spectrum. And then it finally came out in the Spectrum after it had been released on every other format there is. So it absolutely is a money grab. Playing on that name, and like you say, not programmed by the very guy that had the wherewithal to make those games, but obviously suffered from a lot of his own personal problems along with it. And rather than wait for that guy to do that, they just rip him off, which is one of the many reasons I suspect why Matthew Smith probably suffered a bit, because it was a great, successful game, and he did have a lot of mental issues. There's no doubt about that. So then, to add extra insult to that, you then rip off his game, just add 2 at the end of it, and release it on every other format but the one that he programmed it on. I think it's a slap across his face, and it should never have happened. It shouldn't be allowed to do that. Can you imagine if they did that now? We've had this discussion before, but can you imagine if you just made a sequel to Halo on the PlayStation and just made it and just released it? There you go, it's on the PlayStation.
We got some other guys to make it, yeah.
Yeah, we got some other team to make it. It's just on the PlayStation. We're not releasing it on the Xbox. It's just ridiculous. And this is Software Projects, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So, they did Dragon's Lair later down the line and stuff. So,
This. I don't like this for many reasons. I think this is a bad game on every level.
And it bombed massively anyway.
Not only that, but it's a bad game.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And there's a weird bit in it, sort of thing, where I turn into a hamster.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there is. Yeah, it's weird.
It's like, what the hell is this?
And that might have been one of the extra bits. I don't know. I don't know what the modifications were that they made to it to make it more.
I don't know.
Expanded. I don't know. I didn't see it.
Yeah, this is just. Yeah, we can't. I can't. I'm going to be very, very down on this because I just think it's a. I mean, we're talking about, from 35 years ago. I don't know the reality behind it, but to me, this is really just looks like that. So I can only comment from that sort of thing. It may be that, it's just a poor choice, and I think that shows, that there was the games industry sort of thing has always been replete with people just looking to make a quick buck.
Yep.
And this is one of those examples. And we saw the crash 2 years ago in the States. Previous to this, there was part and parcel of this. This is just an example of why it was happening.
Absolutely.
So bad. We don't like Jet Set Willy 2.
No, we do not.
Zapped to the Past does not. So there you go.
Thumbs down.
That's our second to last set of games. We're going to take a break now, and we'll come back we will discuss one of the features that was written in this month's Zap 64. See you in a moment. All right, welcome back. So Zap, we're getting into, at this point, writing features, and we're going to take a look at one of them from this issue. Graham, do you want to tell us what that feature is?
Sure. So it's an interesting time in the UK games industry at this point, and there's all sorts of different companies are popping up and disappearing. Famously, Imagine went under with a bit of a TV exclusive bang at the time, and everyone was waiting for the bubble to burst or get bigger, or nobody. It was it was quite an exciting time to be into game design. It had gone from the guys in their sheds to several people meeting up in bedrooms to more people meeting up in offices, and it's the early foundations of the games business was starting to begin, and the publishers had quite a good grasp on how to get games and products out and get things duplicated. So the machinery of the production was in place, and still some of those games were made by one or two people who just had a knack for making games. There was still a bit hobbyist. There's still a lot of that, and we see that in some of the games that we review. There's games that are great, made by really great designers, and there's plenty that are less well made. So on the back of, and without going into all the history of it, so Imagine went bust, essentially, famously went bust because they made all these promises about these games that never appeared. Famously, the one that everyone remembers is Bandersnatch, which they paid a lot of money to have adverts out. They portrayed themselves as having this very lavish, luxury, executive lifestyle, driving expensive cars, and we pay our designers loads, and hey, we're a very very 80s company, actually. If Gordon Gekko could run a company, it would probably be that, if it was a game design company. And then famously it just was all vaporware. It wasn't real. It was a fugazi. So the company went under, and they got rid of all the people, made redundant, and that was the end of Imagine. And later on, it actually got picked up as Imagine Play the Game or whatever derivative it was, and it became derivative of another company. However, what's interesting is the people who were the key programmers and graphic designers and makers of games in there, who had worked on things like the early bits of Bandersnatch, but on some other titles, then set about their own company, and Denton Designs was born. Now, Denton Designs is interesting for a number of reasons. Firstly, I think it was 5, maybe 6 people. They actually formed a games creation team, who then became games creation team people for hire, and they hired themselves out to game companies to make games on their behalf. That's an interesting business model that was new, and nowadays that's quite common. So independent games teams would come together, and then publishers hire them to make games, and they make those games for that particular publisher. That's common now, but then unheard of, or at least relatively unheard of. So instead of it being sort of big publishers and stuff, and little indie guys that produce the games maybe being picked up by the odd publisher, these guys went in as a team, as a force to be reckoned with a lot of great graphic design and skills, and made games across any platform, remember. So they weren't just about Commodore 64. They made quite a number of games across different platforms. So they made some successful games on the Sinclair Spectrum. So on that, for example, they made Gift from the Gods. On the C64, of course, one of the designers worked on the Frankie Goes to Hollywood game, and then you start to see how these guys start to ramp up and start to appear in different kinds of game. And eventually, of course, they start to release some of the games that Denton Designs became quite famous for. And this article inside of Zap is just about that. Now, what's interesting about that is that, again, we talked about it when they did the Diary of a Game Designer. Zapped wasn't just about the games. Zapped was a magazine that embraced the games industry, and it's really early stuff that's going on here. So remember, this is still in the early days of, never mind Imagine portraying all of their game designers and executives as rock stars. These were just a team of game designers. By the way, Denton Designs, you may not know it, created Spy Hunter. They also created Roland's Rat Race. They did Gift from the Gods on the Spectrum. They did Frankie Goes to Hollywood, was based on a game idea from them. And so they had an influence, and they made some of these games that, and Shadowfire, of course, later down the line, and then stuff like that. So you get the idea that these guys were quite a formidable team to be reckoned with, not uncompromising. And this article is actually about the creation of them. And I quite like it because it's unusual for a magazine, because the other magazines weren't really about this. So they weren't about young programmers, interesting stuff going on, the birth of the different companies, industries, what they were doing, how they came to be. Is where they came from. Remember, these guys are only in their the very late teens, sometimes late teens, early 20s. So they're very young people who were making these stuff. And of course, Denton went on to make some really great product. So it's just interesting to see an article about how something came to be that was quite interesting and different at that time. And again, Zapped pioneering those kind of articles, because you don't get these in, with the best will in the world. Computer and video games was literally kind of avoided the industry and the people behind them and just focused on product and face value product. In this issue of Zapped, there's an enormous angry rant about the fact that the other games, in response to Zapped magazine, taking this kind of approach to the publishing of articles like this and the way they approached it, faking exclusives. So they would go and physically visit the software houses, see a game over someone's shoulder, and review that game as if they'd had an exclusive. Even if the game wasn't ready, they did that and started to try and get the drop on Zapped and its exclusive. So they were kind of playing dirty and then saying that Zapped was designed and it was a bit cheap and it was a bit stupid and being hypercritical, but realizing, I think, that because they were doing the kind of things they're doing here with this article, and the kind of things they did with the game designers, and embracing not just the people who play the games, but the people who make them, and making them superstars, but really just so that the people who play the games have a bit of background about who makes what, and that makes the industry what it is. It isn't about cult of celebrity. None of these guys are going to become celebrities now. Later down the line, many of these people become quite retro superstars in many ways, some of them. For the magazine to embrace those creative teams, the creative companies, and do all of that is an innovation in that magazine, because the others weren't doing that, which is what Zapped was really good at. It explored the territory which the other magazines had foolishly ignored, and then later tried to berate Zapped for doing that. Fair play to Zapped. They just stuck to their guns and carried on doing what they did best, which is just carry on writing stuff like this. So I found it a very interesting article about a time in the games industry where it's just becoming more than hobbyists in Britain taking on games and making them. You've got teams of people coming together. They've got a style to that team. They've got a brand and their own identity, and they're starting to push that into other areas. And the publishers are starting to notice that and push things out. And gradually, you start to see how that starts to manifest. That's my thoughts on it, anyway.
Yeah, no, yeah, it is a very good article sort of thing. Just say they did the ports of Spy on Earth. They didn't create Spy on Earth. They did the ports to Spectrum.
The C64,
and Roland's Rat Race. Yeah. They converted that to the Spectrum as well. But yeah, Denton Designs were really interesting. They were almost, the name itself, like Denton Design, is quite it's quite an evocative name sort of thing. It sounds different to a lot of game companies, and I think you're right sort of thing. When Shadowfire came out, there's a really nice bit in the articles about the sort of overarching sort of goals, what they want to sort of achieve, which is, with the Shadowfire, they sort of icon-driven design, and then with Frankie Goes to Hollywood, these window pop-ups, and then they want to get into sort of this educational stuff and sort of bring it all together with animated stuff with what would eventually become Enigma Force, which was Shadowfire 2. And I think there's lots of really good stuff in this article. And one of the things I did actually like sort of reading this article was the makeup of the team at Denton Design, which is, we think about the early games industry sort of thing, it's very, very male-dominated.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about this sort of thing is it's 3 guys and 2 women. Yeah. The 2 artists, the girl, and the way they sort of speak about each other, everybody's viewpoint is valid. Yeah. Nobody's a boss. They said they've all got the word director on their business cards because they're all equal. And I think this was a really, you look back on the sort of, especially things that that have gone on ever since sort of thing. But this notion that this team of just people whether male or female. It's just about what they could do. The article mentioned sort of thing that the two women are working visually on the 2 Frankie games for Spectrum and Commodore 64, and how this all works together, and writing the inlay for the cassette of it, and how everyone's chipping in with ideas, and nobody's fully in charge, but nobody has the ego to sort of want to be that sort of thing. It sounds like a really sort of interesting way to approach game design. It reminded me of sort of thing of what I read about sort of early Valve, and how Valve software sort of thing was like no one's a boss, everybody just work on what you want,
famous flat structure,
do all that sort of thing. Yeah, exactly. And this is an early example of that. And I think Denton, they had a really particular look, they had a really particular design, and they fully designed and pitched and made Frankie Goes to Hollywood, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And they were unusual, and I think you're right in pulling out the fact that Zap is really quite brave in covering these, and the way it covers them as well is really positively. It's a really positive article, but not in a sycophantic way. It's a well-written piece sort of thing that's just like, look, these guys are doing this, and they came out of the fire of Imagine and set this up, and they've gone from like what was driving Porsches around to just working in Liverpool, and they're just getting on with stuff, and it's quite interesting to read that business side of the industry sort of thing, which seems almost at odds with Zap, because Zap is quite a playful, light-hearted read, but it also manages to sort of encapsulate this the business of the games industry a lot better than the boring mundanity that Commodore User and CVG sort of seem to sort of, this is what people want. They want typing adventures and things like that. No. We want to. Who are making these games? Who are they? What And I really like the sort of incidental details about how the two guys got into it. Like one was a carpenter or something, and he just thought, I'm just going to change my job, and just went off and just learned how to code and got hired in a pub. It's like that kind of sort of anecdotal story is really refreshing and interesting to read. Even now, I found this. A well-written, informative, interesting read about stuff you just don't normally find out about, and to see that sort of software development side of things just being spoken about in a kind of matter of fact, this is what we do, this is the business side of stuff, and the way they're sort of quite frank about, we take on ports because that keeps the lights on, is really sort of, that's what goes on, that's the business side of it. And I thought this was a good article. I thought it was interesting to read, and like I said, I was just going back to sort of thing that the maker of the team sort of thing is the way that there's no element of the article that sort of makes light of the fact that it's 2 women working in it, which was very it's just people,
creative people.
Really refreshing to read from an article written in the mid 1980s.
And that's when I say that it paints the right picture of the industry at that time, because the wrong painting of the industry at that time is big games crashes, like famously with Atari and all of that, or later then you've got big game promises and failures, British ones like Imagine and stuff. So that isn't the industry, that wasn't the games industry, that was just people profiteering, people making mistakes. I mean, that happens in business, right? But this was a really positive article about a new fresh team, really with a great dynamic, very diverse, taken on some interesting roles, loaned money by Ocean for the first bit of kit as well, just so they could get off the ground. Just it's the industry supporting the industry to be, and I like that. And the article felt like that. It didn't feel like it was lording anything over them. It wasn't overly promoting anything they did. It didn't do that. And that's actually clever writing to do that. It doesn't feel like you're reading an advert for Denton Design Games. It just feels like you're reading an interesting article about people who make games who happen to be called Denton Designs and have had a interesting journey to where they became and where they might go, and I think that Zap heralds that in the way that it does is very refreshing, because it's still early days in that industry. It doesn't seem like it when you've got companies like Ocean, but there aren't lots of companies like Ocean. There is Ocean and there is a few others that have the power to be able to throw money at licenses, but game developers and designers, programmers, graphic artists, those are the people that make the games. The publishers might very well finance them and do all of that stuff, but these guys are the programmers, the real artisans in that little clique, really, in the sense that what you load up and play and move around on the screen is what they've created. Especially artists and programmers and designers of a good quality. Yeah, absolutely.
Because these guys clearly knew this stuff.
Yes.
And and again, it's that snapshot into the making of games. We got much more detail in the Braybrook stuff, and obviously the Braybrook diary continues, but this is them talking about writing the cassette and coming up with ideas for the different puzzles and what have you. It's good. Good choice. I liked it. So there you go. That was Denton's Designs covered in Zap issue 4. It's worth a read if you want to go back and have a look at that. Because Denton Designs were a cool software house. We'll be back in a moment with our last set of games for this issue. So stay tuned. Welcome back. This is our final section of games, our final collection of games, from this issue 4 of Zap 64, August 1985. We're going to look at the first one of those, and the first one we're going to look at is a game called Lands of Havoc. So, Graham, what did you think to Lands of Havoc?
So this is a Sabre Wolf imitation, essentially, I felt. Run around, big environment, big-ish. Fast, though. I have to say, it was, you were zipping around the screen at a pace, but run around, collect stuff, avoid the baddies. It's Sabre Wolf, just not a very good version. And it just felt like a misfire completely. And just, if I want to play Sabre Wolf, we've had this discussion about these games. I play Sabre Wolf on a Spectrum, I would play it on that, because I don't really rate any of the other versions of it. I know Sabre Wolf actually eventually does come out on the C64, but probably a bit late, and it's probably not even that bad. But this is just, it's a zoom about. Some of the map screens as well were just really sparse. I think they got bored doing them. They just put a couple of blocks in. There's not much thought to this. It felt thoughtless, just zoom, and like I say, zoom about. There's little tiny sprites a la Sabre Wolf. It's Sabre Wolf, but with parts of it missing. But mostly fun graphics, and it just becomes a tedious flip screen bunch of rubbish, and just and yet another collect 'em up arcade adventure. I hesitate to use the word arcade or adventure for this. And the music in game was bloody shocking, awful.
Yeah. It's absolutely 100% a Sabre Wolf knockoff. I couldn't quite figure out what you were. You were some kind of weird dinosaur.
I thought you was a dinosaur. Yeah, it was a dinosaur
that shoots a laser, but it only shoots a laser left or right. You couldn't shoot up or down.
Tell me about it.
You had to get level with them. Any enemies that kind of came onto the screen. There's a nice idea with the randomized maps that clearly what happened with the game sort of thing was that you got a series of 9 maps, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
That it randomized at the start, so it would tell you at the start sort of thing, put your maps in this order, like a cube, so 3 by 3 by 3 by 3 grid. So then that would then randomize how you play through the level sort of thing. And then this is another, but when every screen just is the same design almost, or randomness, but apart from the actual visuals that stop you moving around, which are a temple, a house, forest, whatever sort of thing. So what's the point? There's nothing different in the design. The thing is, and according to review, it's got 2,000 screens or whatever, but it's like, so what?
Yeah.
Because it feels like a sort of technological arms race.
Yes.
Like, look how many screens we've got. It's a great bullet point for the back of the box. You've got 2,000 screens to get through. Like, yeah, but 2,000 screens of rubbish is still 2,000 too many. It's just another more flick screen nonsense sort of thing. It's just again, like somebody. I don't know. It really did feel like some kind of like, oh, I'm going to make a Sabre Wolf game sort of thing without, I imagine, cramming 2,000 screens into C64 memory. Okay, clever. Not noticing that. And yeah, it did move fast, and there's some weird sort of options because you could knock the speed up to full speed. It was like 9 speed options.
That's right.
Which I didn't quite get the point of, because if you put it up to 9, it became absolutely 100% unplayable. If you put it on 5, well, yeah, it's all right. Well, just leave it at 5.
I mean, I felt they did that because they could. I mean, they've highly optimized code, and so we're going to show it off, kind of thing.
Yeah, this felt like a technological willy waving. Look what we can do, sort of thing. But with that, a very clever programmer, but not a very good game designer.
Yes, absolutely.
And they looked at Sabre Wolf, said, yeah, I could do that, and they did it, and then they didn't realize actually what people enjoyed about Sabre Wolf.
Yeah, absolutely. And to think this was $9.95 full price. So I'm sorry, but no, it's a rip-off. And it was not only was it a rip-off of another game, they ripped off the packaging of that game. So it was not just a rip-off. This was a blatant rip-off. And I think there was a frustration that Ultimate didn't release their games on the 64 in enough speed and time. They were famously slow to release things, but that wasn't their home platform, really. No, and they knew more than anyone that just releasing ports for the sake of it isn't.
Well, I think the thing
really
is
a good thing.
Ultimate knew, if you look at, we've already looked at Entombed, and there'll be Black Witch and Staff of Karnath. Ultimate made games for the platform.
Yes,
classic sort of Spectrum games, your Night Law, and all those kind of things. They're made for the Spectrum. They play to the Spectrum strengths. Sabre-Wulf, it plays to the Spectrum strengths. That's what they do. Then, like you said, they're not about just, we've got it on here, we'll put it across. I mean, Sabre-Wulf does eventually come to the 64, but it's ages away. It's not for a while, I don't think. I can't remember when it come out. But they weren't about, we're just going to put this game, we're going to put it on every platform. It was, no, we make this game for this platform because this game suits the strengths of that. Yeah. You couldn't see Entombed on the Spectrum because it'd be dreadful. It'd be awful. It'd look
bloody awful.
I can't imagine it. Because there's colourful sprites and everything. So they weren't about that. This just feels, like I said, it's a programmer looking for a game designer.
Yeah, I agree. And just ripping off somebody else's idea is not a good thing to do.
No, it's not. So we don't like that. More things we don't like on Zapped of the Past. We're finding out all these things we don't like. It's great.
It's true.
It is true. So let's move on. And I believe we're probably going to have a bit of a disagreement over this next one. But our next game, our second to last game, is Eledon. So Eledon, I'll go first here, and then you can you can slam me. I don't mind. Okay, so Eledon is another flick screen platformer, collect 'em up type thing, where you play a fairy flying around various screens trying to collect things to solve puzzles and move on. I am going to be honest here and say I didn't actually mind this once. Now there's a weird caveat here, sort of thing. The essentially like Gribbly. So before Gribbly's Day Out sort of thing, there's a mechanic in this sort of thing where if you're walking past anything on a platform, you're safe. But if you fly into it, it will damage you. Same as what Gribbly's Day Out did. The problem was Gribbly's Day Out, a similar sort of thing to that, but in this day, if you hold down the fire button, you hover. And then that means you've got complete control over your character. If you don't hold down the fire button, then gravity kicks in and drags you down and makes it really hard. As soon as you learn to just hold down the fire button all the time, this game is really simple and quite easy to navigate and a lot better for it. But why they didn't make that the default, I'm not quite sure. Because, as a fairy, just make me hover. If I want to move up, just let me move up. That's what should happen. There's some the visuals are really nice in this. I really did like the visuals. The sprites are nice. The backgrounds are nice. Cauldron-esque vibe to them. Very Palace software style of look to them, I thought, which is always quite nice. And it made it look quite different. The sprites are quite big. Your fairy that you control is quite big. There's some interesting touches throughout. Like there's areas which are dark, which just have these sort of eyes that you can see. And you kind of have to sort of try and figure your way through them. Yeah, it's all right. It's a nice, decent map. There's some interesting stuff going on. It's another collectible. It's another platformer. But the fact of, they should have fixed that control system. I didn't hate it. It's better than most of the stuff we've played that's similar to this. It's all right. I think you didn't like it, didn't you, though?
My issue with this is it's just yet another collect. I mean, firstly, let's not just be down on it for the sake of being down on it. Graphically, it's quite pretty. The graphics are pretty good in it, I have to say. Even by, there's lots of multicolour graphics going on in there. The layout of the screen is quite nice. The presentation of the main sprite is actually pretty good, and the animation, that's all good. The problem is with these games is once you get past that, there's not a lot to do other than fly around and collect stuff, which is fine. I played it for a while, and the screens were quite interesting, and I didn't really get an idea of how big the game was, but it doesn't matter. It was quite good, and like you say, once you've figured out the control system, it becomes a bit more playable and a bit more fun. But then once you've got that, but the trouble is, it's where does it go? Because if it's just endless flying around, picking up stuff, collecting stuff, I think I'm just getting that, I don't what you call it, collect 'em up fatigue.
Absolutely.
Because there just seems to be a lot of them, and this is a pretty one. If you take away all the other crap variants of this type of game, this is a lot better than any of those by miles. But I don't think it deserves the super praise that it gets in the magazine. Certainly, I don't think it's graphically, yes, but some of the other stuff not as such. They say this has got a lot of. Well, actually, there's an interesting dichotomy really, because the reviewers say, I don't know how long you could put up with this for really, because it is quite repetitive, and yet that doesn't come over in its last ability scores and everything else. But that said, my chief complaint was that this is just a bit vacuous and a bit empty and a bit dull, and I think pretty but dull.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that. I agree with that sort of thing. This is like a thing on a spring in that it has one appealing element to it. The thing on the springs was its music. This is its visuals, and that when you're looking for something, when you play something like Brian Bloodaxe or you play something like Jet Set Willy 2, or you play something like the numerous other ones. Is everyone's a Wally or any other kind of those kind of things. Nutcracker, Rocky Horror Picture Show, which don't have any of those kind of appealing elements. This just stands out in a crowded space because at least it has something. And yeah, absolutely, I completely agree. Sort of thing. Once you get past those visuals, sort of thing. Once it's like, okay, yeah, you where's the meat? Where's the meat on the pretty bones? There's not much to it. I agree with that. But in a sea of so much dross, a single element is enough to possibly lift something to some at least a slight height above them. Like Thing on a Spring, it's that one element. As if one element of the game is done okay, then I'm more than willing to sort of go, okay, right. There's something here, and I think there is some, because a lot of them don't seem like they've got care and attention. This ran well, care, and it looks nice. The animation's nice. I'm always in favour that you can land and walk through stuff, or if you're flying, it hurts you. That sort of dual mechanic of where you can be careful and where not. There's some nice bits in that. There's a few, it's not perfect. I'm not in any way, shape, or form, but it's one of those things where I'm willing to cut it a bit of slack because it seems like a bit of effort's been put into it. Well,
it, like you said, rightly so. This feels like a bit like a Palace game. Then the Palace has that Palace polish. Graphically, they tend to do that. And in reality, in a similar way to Seikudama of Antiriad, which we'll cover later, is an explorer / pick things up and do stuff.
Absolutely, it is, yeah.
But it has a finality, whereas this didn't feel like it had one. It probably does, actually. There must be an end to it, I suppose. But it just felt a bit like a long journey of the same thing over and over again. The screens are varied, but not that varied. But, like you say, in a sea of games of this type, to stand out, you've got to be doing something better than all of them. And this graphically is streets ahead by miles. So it does have that. And its sound isn't terrible. You can switch it off. It has a pause, which is interesting because not many games had a proper pause back then. There are some nice little tricks up its sleeve, and just you don't see many games that look like that. Generally speaking, it's brave. I think it's safe to say it's brave because it's graphically interesting. It's not going to appeal to everybody. A game with your main protagonist being a fairy character, it's just not. But that said, why not? And graphically, it's pretty. So, and I think that's something to say.
I think so. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it is another one of them. But I think we agree on if you have one element that shows care and attention.
Yeah,
I'm more likely to be forgiving for it. And it's well programmed and well put together, and like I said, it's smooth and runs nicely. So Eledon, yeah, it's all right. Yeah, it just looks pretty. Right, our last game for this issue of Zapped 64 is international tennis. We've had basketball, we've had football, now we have tennis. Graham, what did we think to international tennis?
Well, okay. It's I don't get me. I liked it. It's playable. It's a playable enough tennis game. It's interesting. It's side to side. It's just late to the game. My comment was it's a good game, but it's late to that party because it's already been beaten by a better tennis game.
Oh, do you think so?
Yeah. So it's playable, but I found the other tennis game just marginally more fun to play, even if it was a bit slower. But this is kind of a different approach. If you shrunk the sprites down, you could easily have sensible tennis here. So.
Yeah.
So
is there a sensible tennis?
No. Then there's an idea for any people that are out there listening, make sensible tennis. But no. But if you shrink the sprites down to that sensible size, you've got a sensible. It could easily be sensible tennis because it has that kind of speed and immediacy and stuff like that. And it's all the international insert sport here games. They're all really good at what they are.
Yes.
There's nothing. This isn't bad. This is a really good game. It's just a bit late to the party. There's better sports games than this. So if you like tennis and you got this, you wouldn't be unhappy with it. No. Likewise, if you got any of the other tennis game, I forget the name of it now, but the other tennis game that we had. But
on-court tennis.
So if you played on-court tennis, you're not going to be disappointed. They're both good in their own way. This is a different angle. Literally a different angle. And I think out of the two, one is more tennis simulatory, one is more fun, sporty game. And I'd liken that in modern parlance. I'd liken that to a little bit to the idea of the real fancy tennis games that you get now. I forget what's the most recent tennis game that's really amazing.
I don't know. Is it Smash Court?
Smash Court. Well,
Smash Court tennis or virtual tennis?
Virtual tennis. There's even one on mobile which is super popular now where you can play and it's the same on-court tennis view. Alternatively, albeit that it's not the same. It's the same sort of view. International tennis had that kind of manic, sonic tennis appeal. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that, because, whether you like tennis games or not, having a tennis game that has a bit more speed and fun and challenge to it, as opposed to one that's coming from a different angle, I guess. I think there's a place for both. I wouldn't like to say which one I'd prefer. I liked on-court tennis. I liked international tennis for different kind of reasons. But these international games, I've revisited, as we've revisited them all, so international soccer, international basketball, now international tennis, as we revisit them, you realise how good they actually were all along. And because these were also cartridge games, so these were all released on Commodore cartridge. Nobody really talks about the Commodore cartridge games, but there was a few. Yeah. And the international games were all cartridge games, so as well as tape and disc, whatever. So these were well-made, well-engineered games. You're not going to put anything on a cartridge that is crap. Not since E.T. did it and they became famously landfill. So they were slick, and they kind of got better. But each slight iteration, something improved. And this one's, the sprites aren't quite as massive, but it's fast and bit fast and furious tennis. I enjoyed it. It's just, is tennis really playable in that perspective? I don't know. It's kind of weirded me out playing it. I got a bit kind of wangy-eyed, but
it did. I think I get what you're saying, sort of thing, because it is. I don't know of many other tennis games that are viewed from the side on. So there's much to like about this. I mean, another great sports sim from Commodore. It's another one.
Yeah,
like you said, basketball, football, they're all great. The full control and side on view. They like that view from the side.
Well, that's their engine, right? So.
Yeah, the sprites are really well animated.
Yeah.
I mean, I really like the sprites. And it's sparse, but effective sounds, what it is, sort of thing. But it's, what do you need? You need two people on a tennis court hitting the ball back and forth. Yeah. It runs nice and fast. And I think that's what I preferred to on-court tennis. I found on-court tennis just a bit, this feels nice and speedy. It feels fast. I like the freedom in this as well, because being able to have full control of your play, run about wherever you want, sort of thing, offers both its advantages and disadvantages. You've got to position yourself wherever you want to go on the court to hit it back or forth. You've got to make sure where you can football when you're doing serves and stuff. So that is like a really nice touch that it's your fault for doing it wrong. You need to time your hits right. You need to where you want to hit it, up, down, left, right. All 8 directions of the joystick are used to position your shot when you go to hit it. But you've got to get there first. There's some good things to this. I really, really enjoyed this sort of thing. And when I first started batting, I was getting battered by the computer, even at the lowest level. But by about the 3rd or 4th game, I was starting to hold my own and get stuff like losing to 30 or 40-30 and then get the winner. And then I think it was at 4-0 I won my first game, and then I won the second one, and I could start to hold my own and have some decent rallies and stuff. And it's like you said, I think it's right. It's another international insert sport name here that Commodore just got spot on.
Yeah, it's good.
Just, I never played this back in the day.
No, I never came across my radar.
I don't think I was even aware that this existed.
No.
I never saw it on any tape. I never saw it anywhere to play. But going back to it now, I'm glad I did. I really enjoyed this. Yeah. This passed a good. Yeah. I did a good couple of sets. I like the. It's like the little things, like you don't just swap sides; they run around.
Yes. Yes.
It's little things like that sort of thing. So they leg it from side to side, and having that side-on view. I think I get what you're saying, sort of thing. It's like you're so used to tennis games being seen from the baseline, and that sort of you're looking there and you're playing for that. But I'm actually seeing it from the side and it being all the same. Yeah, it's kind of odd, but once you get used to it, all tennis games like that.
It's how the umpire sees it.
Commodore were just good at doing these. And did they do anything else?
International snooker, maybe?
No, that's not a sports game. I mean, did Commodore release any other game?
That'd be something we'd have to do a little bit of digging into and find out. I suspect so, because they did have a team of game developers in there, because they initially made quite a few games instantly for the C64 back then, so worth checking into.
It's worth looking into, but yeah, that's good. So there you go. We liked international tennis. Another good to round up on a positive.
Yes, absolutely.
I think
absolutely.
I think that's good to end on. That's our games for issue 4 of Zap 64 for August 1985. We've looked at quite a few. Obviously, we looked at 9 in the first part. We looked at 9. And so we've looked at I'll just go through them. We've looked at Beachhead 2, Clumsy Colin, Jack Charlton's Match Fishing, Rocky Horror Show, Nutcracker, Way the Exploding Fist, Thing on a Spring, Due to a Kill, Stop the Express, The Fourth Protocol, Jump Jet, Brian Bloodaxe, Confuzion, Captive, Jet Set Willy 2, Lands of Havoc, Elidon, and international tennis. We'll do our usual now, where we'll each pick a game as to what we want to put in, and we'll each put a joint game in as well that we'll want to put into our recommended list, sort of thing. So I'm going to hazard a guess that we might have the same joint game.
Yeah, it has to be, doesn't it? Way of the Exploding Fist.
It has to be Way of the Exploding Fist, yeah.
Gotta be.
It's still great, from every angle. Yeah, go play Way of the Exploding Fist. So I think that's our joint game. If you didn't get, we're quite positive about that game. Do you want to put your game in? What other choice do you want to put in?
I would put in there Beachhead 2.
Beachhead 2?
Yes, because I think just for the dagger throwing level. No, the other ones I can skip. But, it's got speech, it's got 4 little mini games. They're all good fun, well animated sprites. And that dagger throwing level's hilarious when you're playing that 2-player, so good laugh.
Yeah, that's a good call. Okay, so our last one, I'm going to pick...
Tricky.
It is tricky sort of thing, but I think I'm actually going to go with Confuzion.
Yeah, good choice, yeah.
And there's a couple I could have put, International Tennis or Fourth Protocol. I think Fourth Protocol is, if we're going to bend the rules, needs to go in there too, because it's something very different. But I think Confuzion is just a really good arcade puzzler.
Yeah, and maybe the rule should be that all gold medal games just go in automatically, really.
Yeah, well, if they're worth it. We may not agree. We didn't put Elite in, did we?
Well, they get the golden buzzer, don't they? So they officially, so we have to look at them as an inclusion as the gold series. But
but we don't have to agree that they're any good. We didn't put Elite in.
No, exactly.
So I would say the Fourth Protocol. I do think it is a very, very good game. I did prefer my time with Confuzion. If we're going to recommend games from this issue, Way of the Exploding Fist, Beachhead 2, Confuzion, and Fourth Protocol would be Zapped to the Past recommendations for games from issue 4 of Zap 64, August 1985. Okay, so our last bit of business to do. We've got a few more Crapverts to look at.
Five-a-side. There's something very wrong about that image. It's just.
So our first one is Five-a-side Football by, who's this by? Anirog.
That looks like someone was having Photoshop training.
So there's a kids game of football going on. It's actual kids. These are actual children.
It's like the shittest spot the ball ever.
So let's break it down. So Five-a-side Football is written in some kind of slightly italic grid line font.
Yeah,
I don't know what you call it.
I don't even know what you call that.
No, it's lines.
Reversed out, italicized sans serif garbage.
And then below that, there's a really bad brick wall, and then photoshopped onto that, and then there's a green rectangle, and then photoshopped onto that is a kid's game of football. There's no other way of putting it. Someone's taken a photo of a kid's game of football, either from the local newspaper or something, for the under 13s footy game or under 14s, and just stuck it on there. I can't. What else is there? Then there's some screenshots of the game. One of them's got the logo. You can see the visuals for the game graphics are really bad. And they've also as well, I do like what they've done with Five-a-side.
Oh, the acrostic attempt at acrostic writing. Yeah.
Yeah, Five-a-sides have got fast-moving characters, ideal family entertainment, voice master generated speech, exciting simulation, amazingly realistic animation, speed and skill, ingenious method of settling arguments.
That might be a battle to the death.
What's that got to do with football? Demanding challenge at all 3 skill levels. Enormous fun from start to finish.
Yeah, it's like the worst version of DISCO I've ever heard.
But, and I know who that is in the picture sort of thing, the graphics in the middle of the image sort of thing, there is Pele. Now, I don't think Pele was much of a five-a-side footballer.
No.
I'm sure he was, but he's not famous for that.
Well, and I think if he played that five-a-side team at the top of that image, he is going to be distinctly advantaged. Those 9-year-old kids don't stand a chance against the footballer of his international reputation and skill.
We've got a ringer in for this. How old is he? Oh, he's 12.
Well, he's 12 in Brazilian.
He was born in a leap year. On the 29th of February.
So something tells me that Anirog, which has got I bet that's Annie and Roger's games or something like that. It was bound to be. with their classic chromium logo. That image of the penalty with it's not so much the goalie, which is bad enough. It's the fans in the background who are just I don't know what's going on there.
They look like they're being held up at gunpoint.
Yes, I think that's something tells me that that's not the greatest football game that ever was.
It's not. I remember it was shit. It was awful. The advert basically, the best thing about it was the kids. So that's a bad advert. Our next one. So from the greatness Melbourne House do, then we've got this Starion.
Starion. It's honestly, Gov, it's not an Elite ripoff.
Can we move on? Is that it?
Yeah, that's honestly, it's like, so just imagine explaining. So what happens in the game? Well, you fly 3D spaceships around a 3D space universe, and do they look like anything? Does it look like Elite? No,
it's a spaceflight epic. It says in the top right corner, so in a really small font in a big square.
So you've got white vector graphics on a plain black background with some details at the bottom. Yeah, it does sound a bit like Elite. No, this is not so. I never actually played this. I don't know if it came out in the 64 in the end. I don't know. This is the Spectrum advert. I don't know if it's it probably did, and if it did, it would be shit because vector graphics and the Commodore 64 do not go.
No, they don't. But it's just a bad advert. I hate the way they've included the stars in Starion, like a massive one in the O.
Yeah, and look at that. Look at the Starion writing. It's got that. Again, that kind of, the
80s style
80s
sort of landscape.
Gradient, landscaped gradient with, and then we've got the classic beveled border with the offset gradient, who hasn't done that effect in Photoshop a trillion times? As soon as you put a stroke on a font and stick a gradient in it, you go, wow, that looks cool. And you realise you're not in 1987.
Unless you're trying to recreate that.
Yeah, unless you're trying to recreate it, yeah. And that star looks out of place.
Yeah, the star in the O just makes it look like an anus.
Yeah, and I never liked the Melbourne House logo, but I suppose it is what it is, but that game looks stupid.
It is. So, okay. And we maybe have to push sometimes to find Crapverts, and then every now and again, a magazine delivers.
What happened?
Ian Botham's test match. So the other week we had Tim Loves Cricket. Now we've got Ian Botham's test match, and so this advert is like a sort of it's not Comic Sans, but it's not far away. Ian Botham's test match in the top left sort of thing. Then there's two images of Ian Botham in the middle of this. One is a sort of shot of him playing cricket, an image, a sort of illustration of him playing cricket full on, and then there's a close up.
Yeah. So
with what looks like a turd on his lip.
It's ruby red lips at that.
He's very
He's got no bottom teeth, which is weird. He's got a really elongated neck and a peculiar chin line, and it's all his proportions are all wrong. To me, it looks like he's wearing eye makeup, so he's got his guy liner on there.
He really has.
And yes, like you say, he's furnishing a hairy turd on his upper lip. Add to that the fact that the bridge of his nose looks like he's been 10 rounds with Muhammad Ali at the time it would have been, I suppose, or Frank Bruno. The background one looks like who was that famous sports commentator with a massive chin? Is that Jimmy Hill?
Jimmy Hill.
Yeah, so
it does look like
looks
Jimmy
like
Hill.
If Jimmy Hill and Bruce Forsyth had a child, it would be that.
Had a cricketing child.
Yeah, and it looks like he's swinging a sword, not a cricket bat.
It does. It looks like he's running to chop someone's head off.
And that explains
like this guy in the foreground.
That explains Ian Botham's cricket advantage because he just beheaded anyone that got in his way.
But it is a full cricket simulation with the following features to make it a truly first-class game.
Yes, that's what they always do. They, if I don't say so myself, should be there in little brackets somewhere.
Yep, yeah. Has a scoreboard. You can place 9 fieldsmen anywhere on pitch.
I'd hope it did because it's not cricket if you don't keep score. It's just people hitting the ball.
No, so that's.
But there's terminology in there. There's terminology I'd never heard of. A glance hook, a square cut. Off drive. Yeah, that's all. So for anyone who's into cricket, they're going, wow. If this game features a glance hook, I'm in. Oh my god, it does. You
can also get caught behind.
That sounds positively dangerous if you're swinging a sword. So
yep.
I would worry about Ian Botham if he ever turned up and because that was he didn't look like that, and his hair ever orange? Did he have orange hair? I don't
remember him having that colour hair.
I don't remember a lot about him, but
I can't tell as well if the expression is pained or pleasured.
Well, they've actually
and there's a fine line between them.
Well, they're trying to capture the Ian Botham face because he famously had kind of a sneery expression before he bowled. So I'm guessing it's meant to be that. And that's as much as I know about Ian Botham. I don't know a lot about it. I'm still puzzled why it's essentially he's stood in front of a Japanese flag, but we'll put that to one side for now. I guess it's meant to be a cricket ball, but without the little divvy stripes things on it. So
yeah.
But it just looks like the fact that he's wielding a samurai sword in front of a Japanese flag tells me this game probably started off with different intentions.
I really don't like the font as well for the title.
No, stupid. Never do that. Never do red drop shadow. I mean, that's just written. If you try and do that in Photoshop now, it actually just self-destructs. It just deletes itself from your machine. It's a bit like if you try and do a bevel or a pillow emboss, it just randomly goes nope, and that's it. Photoshop is deleted off your computer, and you can never install it again for the rest of your life
because they've marked you.
Yes, absolutely. It's a self-defense mechanism. It just prevents you from doing anything further with fonts that would terrify the world.
Oh, it's a really bad advert.
Yes.
And if you're listening to this will be on the website, so please go have a look and have a laugh.
Yes, they will all be on the website. All the Crapverts are going on the website. And some choice screens from some of the games. I had to screen grab by the way, for international tennis, that awesome visual of the two tennis players just in their blocky massiveness. So I've got a great grab of that.
Tile screen.
Yeah,
because it's just the same as the international football.
I know. It's just
basketball.
I was like, yes. I want tennis players to do that. I want them to
in all purple.
Yeah,
both of them in all purple.
Make them wear that outfit, in its blocky massiveness and play tennis like that. Do it the old-fashioned way. But there you go. That's me. God, there's so many of these adverts are typeface and type and font horrors that it's actually making. Just looking at that Ian Botham one, aside from the fact that it's got that awful typeface with a red drop shadow, ban that. You've got the Tynesoft logo, which goes from blue to orange gradient on a green background, which renders red unreadable, as everyone knows. So never put orange on green, my boy. It renders you powerless.
It really does. All right, let's finish it. Let's wrap up. We've got the charts. This is the Commodore 64 charts. I think I might have got these from Commodore User, because there was nothing in CMVG for this month.
No,
they didn't have charts.
And Zap does have its own chart, doesn't it? But it's the Zap chart.
It does, yeah. It's Zap chart. It's based on reader likes, isn't it, rather than purchases.
Absolutely.
So, according to Commodore User, let's do a top 10. So at number 10 is Kickstart. Number
choice.
9, World Series Baseball.
Goodness
we
me.
didn't like that. 8, Theatre Europe.
Yeah.
Good choice. International Basketball at 7.
Always good.
Impossible Mission at 6.
Hasn't left the chart in ages.
Pit Stop 2 at number 5.
Deserved.
Shadow Fire at number 4.
Excellent. Yeah.
Dam Busters.
Sheesh. Okay.
Yeah, British, people want to drop bombs. Soft Aid at number 2.
No, that was the multi-game set, wasn't it?
It is, yeah. And for live aid stuff like that. But straight in we believe, probably at number 1, straight in, is what should have been a gold medal, if we haven't said it enough already, is the way of the exploding fist.
Yes. In brackets, gold medal edition.
Our game of August 1985 by some
just
considerable
interesting
margin.
Just look at that top. Obviously, we haven't done the top 20, but just look at that top 20. In fact, look at the top 10 and how many US gold games are in there. They really were literally pumping games out like a crazy machine. So
if you count the top 20, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of the top 20 are US gold game. It's crazy. I mean, to be fair, sort of thing, we weren't keen on World Series Basketball. We weren't keen on Dam Busters, but we like 8. Soft Aid is Soft Aid. There's a lot of good. There's a couple of bits and bobs on there that are quite good. But 7 of those top 10, we've liked.
Yeah, and strangely, Everyone's a Wally is in that chart.
Yeah, number 20.
Yeah,
is too high.
It shouldn't be.
Interesting enough, number 15 is Summer Games 2. We haven't had that yet, though.
This is what Zap were talking about, I think, because they were saying that some of the other magazines were starting to put in news and information and things like that about games that simply were not out, or they were they were getting early US versions, early versions, and just making out that they were out. So that might be part of that. I don't know, because we've not come across any of those yet. So we will.
No, Yeah, we haven't. So there you go. That is issue 4 of Zap 64. So yeah, not too bad. You got anything you want to sort of wrap up and say around all that?
So I think what's the landmark here is the should have got a gold medal with the exploding fist, and I think what that is a statement of things to come, because as we've said in the previous episodes, they started to flex their muscles a bit, and that's the first time you see a British software development team, games production company, flex its muscles on a platform, and all of a sudden it started to become, and suddenly you took notice. It's not the first time it happens, it starts to happen more and more and more, because the programmers are getting better and better, and the graphic designers are starting to embrace the platform, and they're starting to learn little tricks and little things that the Commodore 64 can do, little tricks that the VIC chip that they can use to their advantage in games. And as they start to embrace that and it start to push it forward, things start to take a serious notch up. And we'll start to see, so I think we'll start to see less of the games that are simply crap, and we'll start to see more games that have the graphical qualities of Elidon, that have the playability of Wade Exploding Fist, that have the puzzle nature of this, and there's Confuzion, and there's the games that we've celebrated in this edition. You will now start to see more of them, especially as we head towards September, October, and we head towards the months running towards Christmas. We really are going to start to see things ramp up a notch.
Yeah, we are actually sort of thing. And just to say what's coming up in next issue is actually just backs that up completely. So next issue is September issue 5, September 1985. We will be looking at games like Frankie Goes to Hollywood. We will be looking at games like Summer Games 2. We will be looking... I might actually make us do Graham Gooch's Test Cricket and Ian Botham's Test Match.
Cricket off.
We might have a cricket off. I think that could be quite a lot. We'll have a look at that. We've also got Skyfox. Interesting enough.
Game,
we've got Finders Keepers.
Another good game.
Has appeared. And the start of what I would say is a incredible run of games from a certain developer, and that is Rescue on Fractalis.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So I also might make us do a golf game as well. We'll have a look. So we've got some interesting games for next issue, some really big ones, and there's probably obviously some garbage in there as well. So we'll have a look. But that's it. We've looked at issue 4, August 1985 there. Go play Way of the Exploding Fist. It should have been a gold medal. I've been Adrian Mills.
Should have got a gold medal, Graham Raddings.
We've been Way of the Exploding Fist. Should have been a gold medal. And we'll see you in our next episode. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Zap to the Past podcast. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the world of Commodore 64 games, as well as the music, sights, sounds and news from around the 1980s, driven, of course, by the issue of Zap 64 magazine published at the time. We will be back next week with another podcast, so do please join us. Until then, please head over to zapptothepast.com to sign up to our email list, as well as check out all the links and resources in the show notes. You will also find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram under Zap to the Past. The Zap to the Past podcast is written and produced by Adrian Mills and Graham Raddings and recorded at Flaky Bits 2.0 studio. All opinions expressed are those of the writers, and while we indeed love Zap 64 magazine, the Zap to the Past podcast is not affiliated with it in any way. Stay safe and see you next time.